Have you ever wondered how a modest trading company became an empire ruling over an entire subcontinent? In the 17th century, an unassuming enterprise known as the East India Company was born. Its infancy was marked with the simple trade of textiles, the vibrant spices that added life to every dish, and the deep hues of indigo dye. This venture was far from the colossal entity it would become, its operations confined to trade, devoid of any political ambitions. At this time, the world was a stage for powerful empires, and in the Indian subcontinent, the Mughal Empire was the star. It was an era of grandeur and opulence, but like all great entities, it had its share of internal struggles and external threats, which eventually led to its decline. As the Mughal Empire began to crumble, the landscape changed, giving rise to regional powers, each vying for control, each striving to fill the void left by the Mughals. This turbulent political climate created a unique opportunity, a power vacuum that was ripe for exploitation. And there, in the midst of chaos, the East India Company found an unexpected opportunity. It was as if the pieces of a complex puzzle were falling into place, allowing this modest trading company to extend its reach far beyond commerce. The company began to weave itself into the fabric of the subcontinent, slowly but surely. As it grew stronger, it started to hold sway over the political affairs of the regions it traded with. Unbeknownst to many at the time, this was the beginning of an extraordinary transformation. This was not just the rise of a company, it was the birth of an empire. What started as a simple trading entity was now on the brink of becoming a political powerhouse. The East India Company was not just dealing in textiles, spices, and indigo anymore. It was trading in power, influence, and control. From a mere trading company, the East India Company was on the brink of becoming a political entity, a transformation few could have envisioned. What happens when a commercial entity becomes a political force? Chaos, turmoil, and opportunity. This may sound like a modern-day scenario, but it's a story that unfolded over 2 centuries ago. The East India Company, a British trading entity, took an unexpected turn from trade to politics, and in the process, changed the course of history. Imagine a company, initially engaged in the spice trade, gradually extending its reach, acquiring vast territories, and establishing its own private army. Sounds far-fetched? Well, that's exactly what the East India Company did. It began as a merchant venture in the late 16th century, but by the middle of the 18th century, it had transformed into a geopolitical powerhouse. This transformation didn't happen overnight. It was a series of strategic moves, alliances, and battles that led to the company's ascension. But if we were to pinpoint a moment when the company's trajectory took a decisive turn, it would be the Battle of Plassey in 1757. The Battle of Plassey was a significant event, not just for the East India Company, but for the entire Indian subcontinent. The company, with its well-organized, well-equipped private army, faced off against the Nawab of Bengal and his forces. Despite being outnumbered, the company emerged victorious, thanks largely to the betrayal of the Nawab's commander, Mir Jafar. This victory didn't just give the company control over Bengal, one of the richest provinces of the Mughal Empire, but it also marked the beginning of British colonial rule in India. The East India Company was no longer just a trading entity, it was a political force to be reckoned with. The Battle of Plassey was not just a military victory, it was a clear sign that a new era of colonial rule was dawning. It was a turning point that set the stage for the next 2 centuries, shaping the destiny of not just India but the entire British Empire. How does a foreign company rule a land and its people through a reign of anarchy? Welcome to the Reign of Anarchy, a period that marked the rule of the East India Company in India. It's a tale of exploitation, of new laws that fractured the social fabric, and of the profound socio-economic impact that resonated across the land. The East India Company, a commercial entity from a distant land, became an unlikely ruler. But it wasn't just about trade, it ventured into governance, and in doing so, instigated a period that would be remembered as the Anarchy. It was an era that saw the company exerting control over the vast Indian subcontinent, an endeavour far from its initial remit. The company, armed with its newfound power, introduced new laws that unsettled the equilibrium. It wasn't just about the disruption of trade, it was about the disruption of life and livelihoods. The company's laws heavily favoured its interests, often at the expense of the local populace. The once thriving local industries were left crippled, their futures uncertain in the face of the company's voracious appetite for profit. And then there was the Bengal famine of 1770, a catastrophe that laid bare the extent of the company's exploitation. The famine, which resulted in the death of millions, was exacerbated by the company's policies. Despite the severe food shortage, the company continued its rigorous tax collection. It's a stark example of the company's disregard for the welfare of the people it ruled. The socio-economic impact of the company's rule was profound. The once prosperous lands were rendered impoverished, the wealth siphoned off to fill the company's coffers. The people who once enjoyed a life of relative prosperity were left to grapple with poverty and despair. The company's rule was not just about the assertion of power, it was about the systematic dismantling of a society and its economy. The Reign of Anarchy, as it came to be known, was a dark chapter in the history of India. It was a period marked by chaos and exploitation, where a foreign company, driven by its insatiable greed, imposed its will on a land and its people. It's a cautionary tale, a reminder of what can happen when power is wielded without regard for those it affects. The anarchy, as William Dalrymple so eloquently recounts in his book, is not just a historical account, it's a narrative that resonates with our times. It's a study of power, of exploitation, and of the devastating consequences of unchecked ambition. The company's rule was a period of chaos and exploitation, a dark chapter in the history of India. All empires fall, and the East India Company was no exception. In the grand tapestry of history, the downfall of the East India Company was woven by a multitude of threads. Key among these were the growing discontent and the eruption of the Indian Rebellion of 1857. Known as India's First War of Independence, it was a direct response to the company's oppressive policies and marked a significant turning point. The uprising was brutal, bloody, and a stark reminder of the cost of unchecked power. But the rebellion was not the only factor. The East India Company, once a titan of trade and military might, had become a financial liability. Mismanagement, corruption, and a series of economic blunders had left it on the brink of bankruptcy. The British Crown, wary of the instability, stepped in. In 1858, an Act of Parliament transferred the control of the company's territories directly to the Queen. The once mighty East India Company was dissolved, its reign of anarchy ended. Yet the legacy of the East India Company was far from erased. It had indelibly shaped the path of India's history, and its effects were far-reaching. Its model of corporate governance, combining trade and territorial control, was unprecedented and would be echoed in future colonial endeavours. The company's impact on the world stage was equally profound. It played a pivotal role in globalising trade and commerce, and its influence can still be seen in the modern economic landscape. Its practices, both commendable and reprehensible, serve as lessons in the perils and potential of multinational corporations. The East India Company might have been a product of its time, but its legacy is timeless. Its rise and fall are a stark reminder of the power that corporations can wield and the potential for devastation when that power goes unchecked. The East India Company may have fallen, but its impact is still felt today, a testament to the power and influence it once wielded. What lessons can we learn from the rise and fall of the East India Company? This narrative has taken us on a journey through an era of relentless ambition and chaotic rule. We've seen the East India Company ascend from an unlikely contender to a dominating force, ruling with an iron fist during its reign of anarchy. The company's rise was marked by shrewd strategies and ruthless determination, while its reign was characterized by unchecked power and a disregard for the well-being of those under its control. Ultimately, its fall was inevitable, a result of unsustainable practices and resistance from those it oppressed. Reflecting on this, we're reminded of the dangers of unchecked corporate power. The East India Company's story serves as a stark warning that unchecked ambition, ruthless strategies, and disregard for the welfare of others can lead to downfall. The story of the East India Company serves as a cautionary tale of corporate power unchecked, a reminder that history, though in the past, always has lessons for the present and future.